Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Board Director, and Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategy Consultant, helping members of the C-Suite and their teams reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Still celebrating the beginning of 2024, talking about a mindset reset on this real conversation from the C-Suite. I have joining me Ms. Shawn Smith. She is the founder and owner of Shawn Smith Communications. She has more than 20 years of experience serving in senior communications roles with global brands, including Walt Disney Company and Warner Brothers. And she has a company that provides integrated communication services to a diverse range of clients, from corporate to emerging brands to authors and entrepreneurs like me. Welcome back, Shawn. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Anita.
Of course, of course. So, in our first conversation, we talked about a mindset reset and how the most important thing is setting intentions rather than resolutions, because intentions are more likely to get us where it is that we're trying to go. So, now I want to talk to you about your entrepreneurial journey. Tell us how that began from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. I've been doing communications for, like you said, about 20 plus years. And I started at a PR agency, an African American owned PR agency called Tobin and Associates. Pat Tobin, the owner of the agency, was one of the few Black women that owned a PR agency. So she was a mentor of mine, gave me my first PR job. And then from there, I went to a big agency, a global agency called Rogers and Cowan. I was there for a few years working in the film and television division of the company. And from there, I went to Disney. So I was at Disney for nearly 10 years. I was, managing. I joined the company during the tween craze. So Hannah Montana, Jonas Brothers. So I was working on all of those amazing properties. And then did a lot of work with film and TV properties. So all of the Disney films, launching products inspired by those films. I also managed communications for a Disney store for 3 of those 10 years. So I was traveling around opening Disney stores around the country, which was amazing. So I led the campaign to open the Disney store in Times Square. It was huge. It was amazing. Iconic for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was at Warner Brothers for about 4 years, managing PR in the global brands and consumer products division. So I managed campaigns for the DC properties, so Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, and then the animated properties, so the Looney Tune characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so starting my own agency has been amazing. I've been in business now for a little bit under a year, approaching a year. But it's not something that I had planned for, honestly. It's something that people in my life, my family and colleagues had encouraged me to do for many, many years. But I always felt like I was the person that really enjoyed the corporate structure and environment. I didn't really think I had that entrepreneurial spirit. And so, but it's been quite a joy to be in this place now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I felt like it was the right time for me to be in this place to start my own agency. And one of the biggest concerns that I had was not having someone to give me structure. So I had to create my own structure. And also finding clients.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to feel like I had to be in constant pitch mode and identifying new clients. But what has happened is all of the relationships that I've built at the various companies that I've been at over the years and serving in various roles with professional organizations all over the years, that's where my clients have come from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I didn't have to, they've just come to me organically. I didn't have to, start pitching and new business. And so really it's like all of the things that I've done throughout my career have led me to this place that I am in right now. It's been amazing.
First of all, congratulations. You have a rich history. I was a temp at Disney for a little while. That was one of the most fun gigs I ever had because I was actually paid as they were putting out California Adventure,
Yeah.
that new property over there.
Yeah.
Is it California Adventure? I got that right?
California Adventure. Yes.
Okay. When they were putting that together, they said, we need some people to ride on the rides and tell us how much fun they are. I'm like, are you serious? You're going to pay me to do that? But it was during media day. So there was one of the sportscasters on Channel 2. I cannot remember his name, but we got on, I think it was Tower of Terror. That dude screamed like you never heard anybody scream before. It was just a really fun time. And it was celebrating, I want to say 25 or 50 years. And so I was part of the telecommunications team where we were booking folks for like the special private events. I found the back areas. I mean, they actually took us and said, okay, in order for you to get here by this time, you need to take this back area. And to see some of the back areas was just astounding. And of course, you can't remember them because unless you work there and live there and breathe, you can't remember the back areas. But to be able to have time backstage and see the functioning of the happiest place on earth, it was just incredible. So I know that was a thrill for you. But my question is, when you think about your journey from working with Pat Tobin at an African American communications firm, what was the difference between that worldview in that space and the worldview that you ran into at Rogers Cowan?
Rogers and Cowan.
Rogers and
It
Cowan.
was completely different experience.
Yeah. How so?
So when I was, young professional, my first PR job working at Pat Tobin and Associates, all of my colleagues were people of color, and it really felt like a family. And so, when you're working alongside of people that are from your culture, you have this shorthand way of communicating with one another that just makes it easier, honestly. And so, it was really very much like a family. My colleagues at that time were very supportive, and if we had some kind of family, anyone has any kind of family issues going on, just very loving and supportive environment. And then going into a big agency, Rogers and Cowan, I was, one of, probably you can count on one hand the number of African American people that were in that space, right? In that company at the time. And it was just completely different. I didn't have the same level of support. The manager that I was working for at the time, we had some it was a challenging relationship. He didn't really understand my point of view in a lot of ways. And so it was much more about, I think educating people about who I was versus just having, like I said, at Pat Tobin and Associates, just having that understanding and shorthand. So educating people about who I was and really feeling the pressure to show my value in that environment. It was really different. It was very different. And I know a lot of us have experienced that, going from one environment to a different environment in a work situation can be really tough. But I was there for a couple of years at Rogers and Cowan. And then, like I said, I went on to Disney, but it was definitely not a family supportive environment that I experienced at Tobin and Associates.
Why do you suppose that might be? So we know that obviously you just said coming from an community environment where you use shorthand communication. I love that. I get that. Versus coming here, not only can I not use shorthand communication, but I have to explain myself to you before we can actually get down to the business. Why do you suppose that is? Is it because at Tobin and Associates, it really was more family oriented, and at Rogers and Cowan, it was more business oriented? Not that Tobin and Associates wasn't about the business. Obviously, you get into business for the business, but do you think that might have something to do with it? That one valued people who are driving the projects versus another driving the projects, and people are behind that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And at Rogers and Cowan, I think that, when you are around people that are not like you,
Mm-hmm.
it takes more effort to build that relationship. It just does. That's the honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then you find people that want to take the time to build that understanding and trust.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are going to be people that they don't want to invest the time in you or that relationship.
Yeah.
And they do just want to be about, we are colleagues, let's get the business done. And we don't have to have any other understanding than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that is a part of it. And being at Raj, and I'm so happy that my very first PR role was with an African American owned firm, because I think that I needed that love and care before I went into other situations where I would not have that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like I went to UCLA, so I went to PWI, but it's kind of like this. I think about it, the same things people say about going to an HBCU. I have a niece and a nephew that are currently at HBCU, and it's like you want that community environment and love and respect and all those things. You want that nurturing, especially as a young person,
Mm-hmm.
before you go out into the world where you may not have that, right?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of the same thing in my career, like having that initial experience where I felt that kind of support
Mm-hmm.
surrounding me. I felt like that gave me enough, that gave me what I needed before I was going into other environments and wouldn't have that.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify a couple of things for the community, HBCU is historically Black colleges and universities. What's PWI? I'm going to take a shot here. Predominantly white institution.
Correct.
I
Yes.
got that right? Okay,
Got
look
it
at that.
right.
All right. Okay. So I think the difference is at an HBCU, if you're blessed to go to one, my parents went to and met at Fort Valley State College. And I so growing up wanted to have that HBCU experience, but my grades were not such that I could get in at the time because I still hadn't found myself, right? It took me a while to finally find myself and understand my niche. But so I have always regretted that I did not have that experience. But I think in particular so we all know that young adulthood is a transitionary time for anybody. But for people of color, in particular African Americans, it's so helpful to have that sense of belonging as you're continuing to develop into a young adult, so that by the time you get out into the real world, you're prepared to get out of that cocoon, so to speak, and deal with the realities of not being in an HBCU. So would it be fair to say that the difference between your time at Tobin and Associates and Rogers and Cohen would be one had a sense of belonging for you and one did not?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And also, I think, though, you find your community, right? So
Mhm.
even at Rogers and Cowan, although there were just a handful of us that were African American, of course we found each other. And
Mhm.
so, that may look like us having lunch once a month together, or I know I can go to this person that I have that shorthand communication with when I'm really struggling at work, because they understand that experience.
Mhm.
And same thing being in college and going to UCLA. Um, you know, of course, the Black kids, we had, on Wednesdays, the Black kids would hang out on, on in the yard and just hang out with each other, right? And so you find your community. I didn't hang out a lot because I was an introvert in college, but I had friends through work. I worked on campus, and so I gained a lot of my friendships through work. But that's how I met other Black students. Coming from, a lot of us grew up in the same kinds of neighborhoods, so you have that understanding and have that support. So even if you're in an environment where you are, not the majority in that environment, you still find your community that's going to help you through that
Mhm.
situation and that experience. And that's
And
what I've done in every role that I've had along in my career. That's what I've done.
And that's the question that was percolating in my mind, regardless of the population that you identify with in a corporate setting. As a communications expert, how do we find those folks that we can have shorthand with, even if they don't look like us? What's the process for that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is finding, we talked about mentorship previously, finding a mentor that looks like you. I've had many mentors throughout my career, many mentors, coaches, advocates. But sometimes it's finding a mentor in that environment that looks like you and say, hey, can I take you to coffee? I think that also professional organizations, I'm a big proponent of professional organizations. If it's just not there in the company you work for, sometimes you just have to go outside of that company. And I have been a part of some amazing professional organizations. I was president of Black PR Society LA chapter for like 5+ years to bring us together. And so we can have dialogue about what we're experiencing in our company and share, information with one another about growth and development opportunities and all those things. And so you have to just get it where you can get it. It may be within your company, it may be outside of your organization, but you're definitely going to need that support and that community to be connected with as you're going throughout your career.
I have been thinking about the fact that diversity, inclusion, and belonging really is a two-way street, from the standpoint that it's not always incumbent upon the organization to make that space, but it's also incumbent upon individuals to say, I'm here, where can I plug in to get a sense of belonging? So with that said, let's say you're the only one. How do you develop that shorthand with someone else in the organization who doesn't look like you, but you may have some commonalities that allow for the establishment of rapport and over time the building of a relationship where you can develop some shorthand in some form or fashion?
Yeah, I think that that's so important because you're absolutely right. As human beings, there is definitely going to be things that we have in common. Even if we grew up in different communities and come from different places. I for sure have had colleagues where on the outside it looked like these two people, they have nothing in common.
Right.
But I in those situations, it's my responsibility that to open up and to share a little bit more with them and to get to know them so we can start to figure out where those commonalities are, right? As women, we're going to have some commonalities no matter what community or ethnicity or any of those things, right? And so, but I think it requires you to like share a little bit more. I remember a time early in my career, like I said, going into spaces where I was one of a handful of African American people, or maybe the only one. And when everybody comes in on Monday, how was your weekend and what did you do? I would share very little about what I actually did with my friends and family that weekend because I just thought that these people wouldn't relate to what I was actually doing. So I would say, "Oh, it was great. How about?" And I would turn it back onto them. Well, what did you do? How was your weekend? And I would share very little about myself. And part of that is like protecting myself, right? And then I had to learn that I do need to begin to open up and share a little bit more about myself. And because you have to give that person the opportunity to connect with you. You can't just assume that there is no connection there. And the only way that's going to happen is through exchange of information, of sharing with one another. And through that, I've built some amazing relationships with colleagues throughout the years. And then, there are some people that I've shared information with people, and I'm like, they just will never get it. Right. That person just is never going to understand me. They're never going to get it. And you can have a working relationship with that person, but there are people that, you know, are like, okay, we have figured out where, you know, we have those commonalities already, and built our relationship from there.
Yeah. Some people you're just never going to click with. It's going to be oil and water, and that's okay. But if we still go into it with the idea that diversity, inclusion, and in particular belonging is a two-way street, then we can't always be looking for the door to swing out. Sometimes we need to swing in and be vulnerable enough to have those risks. And that's a great place to pause. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about a mindset reset in 2024 specific to communication styles that will help us make diversity, inclusion, and belonging conversations more of a two-way street within the organization. Community, please come back for that, for our third real conversation from the C-suite with Ms. Shawn Smith, the founder and CEO of Shawn Smith Communications. If you want to see this one again, you know where to go. The website, dranita.com, on the landing page in the center at the top. Click the link that says Keeping It Real Podcast. And while you're there, check out my services and my resources. And please get in the flow. Follow, like, and overshare any of these podcasts to help you reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Please continue to share them with your network. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.